I wasn't sure if I could be as ambitious as I wanted to be. I then got to New York, and the ambition that was required of me just didn't suit me. The New York gallery scene at that point was so cutthroat, and my timing was terrible, so I found it really tricky. It killed me. My entire identity was tied up in what I did, and I'd never really failed at anything, and this felt like a massive failure. So stuck for things to do. I was like, yeah, I'm only $150,000 in debt from grad school, but sure, I'll be fine. And so I launched my own thing, and I was like, how has this happened? Why does the art world have that? There's no 6-year-old watching anybody talk about art. Could we build that? Is that something we should build? No one really talks about our creative health. And I think that's a mistake. I think looking at art and thinking about why an artist has done something is crucial to our wellness. This is an installation I saw 22 years ago, and I can still vividly remember how it made me feel. And I would say that installation art does that more often than not, because you physically have to confront it and negotiate with it.
Welcome to the Installation Art Podcast, the world's #1 and only podcast about installation art and the people who work with it. In each episode, you will hear about the joys and challenges of the medium and get a behind-the-scenes look at the careers and processes of internationally renowned guests. I am your host, Anastasia Parmson. Today's episode is a little bit different. I'm welcoming back a guest who return listeners might remember from episode 31, where we discussed the Australian Pavilion controversy at the Venice Biennale. Carrie Scott is a multi-hyphenate art world professional, an art historian, a curator, a consultant, broadcaster based in London. And she's one of those rare people in the art world who operates across multiple domains with equal fluency. She has worked with major galleries in the US, curated groundbreaking exhibitions, collaborated with visionary artists, and started her own businesses. She's also a valuable voice on social media where she shares critiques, asks provocative questions, and reports from major art world events. If you're not already following her on Instagram, you should be. In this conversation, we talk about what an art consultant actually does, how people like Carrie can help artists, and where does installation art fit into the broader art world ecosystem. Welcome back to the show, Carrie Scott. Welcome back on the podcast, Carrie.
Thank you so much for having me, Anastasia. It's nice to be back. I think maybe, I don't know, you're about to grill me about myself, and that's like the worst.
Really? You don't like talking about your work?
Oh, I like talking about my work. That's,
okay.
And actually that's how I should always frame these things, that it's like, we're just talking about work, not yourself. And there's a difference.
A little bit about you as well. I have a few warm-up questions for you. Just quick, whatever comes to mind first. Do you have a favorite quote?
Oh my gosh, I do. I really do. Of course I do. I don't want to get it wrong either. So am I allowed to cheat and look? It's a quote from Brothers and Keepers, which is a book that was written, I don't even know how long ago, but it's John Edgar Wideman. And like, I have it literally right here because it's in my notes and always is there in case someone else needs it. Like the number of times I've sent it to a friend being like, hey, let's just have some perspective here. But basically, John Wideman, he wrote a memoir, and in it, he sets out to try and figure out why his brother and he ended up on these completely different paths. So his brother was incarcerated for life for manslaughter, whereas John Edgar Wideman was not a hugely successful human being. And this quote is all about what is, how do we end up somewhere? And it goes like this, or I'm quoting directly because I'm reading. You never know exactly when something begins. The more you delve and backtrack and think, the more clear it becomes that nothing has a discrete, independent history. People and events take shape not in orderly chronological sequence, but in relation to other forces and events, tangled schemes of necessity and interdependence and chance that, after all, could have produced only one result. What is? And okay, so I love that for multiple reasons. One, I love skeins of necessity. And I was like 20 when I first heard this and was a English lit major. And literally the word skeins was like, what is this beautiful thing? And the idea of a tangled necessity, anyway, was like really romantic to me. But it stayed with me my entire grown up life that like, you do only end up with where we are. We only end up with what today is. And so no matter how much you try and pick apart the past or even think towards the future, you're just, this is what is. And so, yeah, that's my go to.
A very poetic, beautiful way of saying it is what it is.
Indeed.
What do you like to drink while you're working?
Oh, coffee. So much coffee. All the coffee. Give me coffee.
How do you take your coffee?
Coffee should sponsor me. So I went through an oat milk phase and I really got into that. There's a company here called Overheard where they send you powdered oat milk and you like make it at home so it's less waste and it's fabulous. Love it. But then I started reading about where I am in life. I sort of need more soy because of the estrogen adjacent things that it does. So now I'm having like a tiny bit of soy milk with it. And I'm really missing my ritual of making my oat milk. So really I should have it black, but I have it with a little bit of alternative milk.
Okay. Well, let's get to the main story and let's go back in time. Tell me briefly, where are you from and were you always into art?
I love that you said briefly. So good luck. Right. I was born in the United Kingdom to British parents who separated like seconds after I was born. And my mom was remarried by the time I was 3 and married a man who got a job in the United States. So we moved to the States as I was turning 5 with these 2 British parents. And that is important because I was raised by immigrants in a foreign country. So was told not to say things like bathroom or toilet, but had to say loo, and was sent to school with sausage sandwiches, not peanut butter and jelly. And my dad stayed here, so I went back and forth my whole life, never really feeling American and certainly not feeling English. You know, I'd come here and people would be like, "What's with your ghastly accent?" And I'd be like, What is with my ghastly accent? I don't know." And then I'd get back to America and people make fun of me for the sausage sandwiches and the slight lilt in the way that I talked. And then I moved back here 17 years ago, even though that was certainly not part of the plan. I fell in love with a Brit who I'm now married to and have 2 kids with, and ask myself all the time, like, how did I end up here? Because I really do not feel English or American. I like both. Yeah, I'm a foreigner in both lands. So that answers the where I'm from question. Was I always into art? No. But by the time I was a teenager, I was. So, like, sure, maybe I did always draw and paint, but I can't remember doing that lots as a kid. What I do remember is my sort of middle class family feeling a responsibility to take us and help us become cultured, whether that was going to museums or seeing theater or going to concerts. That was like something we did, whether we came to London or were going into the city from suburban Connecticut, where I grew up. And I very quickly found museum space an interesting place to be. And I've told this story a million times, but my dad, he had a client who was close to the Wallace Collection, so on the same square as the Wallace Collection here in London. And it may have only been like 4 or 5 times, but I remember this so clearly as a memory that he would drop us off there and say, "Hey, I'm going to go see my client. You guys stay here. Don't leave." It was the 80s. That was like fine. And my elder brother and I would run around this museum as if it was our house or our playground. And my brother would go one way, probably to the armor room, and I would hang out with the paintings and kind of imagine myself like I was in them. So there's this amazing Fragonard painting there called The Swing, and I was the girl on the swing. There's another Pietà that's heartbreaking that I just remember sitting in front of and feeling this deep sadness and not really knowing why. And then when I got to university, I was in an art history class and the Fragonard picture came up on a slide and I was like, oh, I know that work. I've seen that work a million times. Wait, hang on. It's a famous artwork? And then all of a sudden I was like, art history is cool. We're in. I get it. I want a piece of this.
So is that how you then started your move towards the art world? Because you said you studied English literature. How did you then go from that to contemporary art?
Well, I mean, back to my quote, no matter how many times I think through it, I've come up with an answer that I think is right, but I question my own memory's bias. I went to university thinking I wanted to do a fine art degree. I loved art in high school, mostly I think because I wasn't a natural academic in some ways, or back then I was a rebel without a cause and trying to figure out who I was. And so the art department was a safe place for me. But my parents were very anti sending us to a super expensive American university for me to do an art degree that would have no practical purpose. So my mother was pretty clear that I had to get a proper degree that I could use. And somehow I convinced her that an English degree was
Very practical.
so practical, so practical. And I would use it wherever I went. The school that I went to, Dickinson College, which was tiny, I went to a high school with 2,000 kids, and then my university was of a similar size. So really small liberal arts college in nowhere, Pennsylvania. It was fabulous because if you wanted to do anything that had a practice-based degree, like a fine art degree, you also had to do the historical side of that. So the fine art department made you take as many credits in art history as you were taking in practice. And the same was true of the English department. So you had to take creative writing classes alongside your analytical, critical studies classes. So while I was doing the English degree, I was also trying to minor in fine art. And because of that, I had to do equal amounts of art history alongside it. And the whole thing became this wonderful mess of a degree. So I graduated with a double minor, almost enough to do a triple major. And the only reason I didn't is because I really wanted to focus on my thesis. But I focused on a unknown modernist poet called Mina Loy, who was also an artist. And I got to bring the art history into my English degree and was still making work and launching exhibitions, even though I'm a terrible artist. But so that's how it all happened. It was enforced by the university's requirements, like degree requirements. And thank God it was. I always say that school was the making of me, and it's very true, it was.
So what was your first job then?
Right out of university, I landed dream job. I had done an internship. I had done two internships. One internship over the summer of my sophomore into junior year. I worked at a .com. This is in the midst of that .com boom. And then I did an internship at the magazine Antiques, Art in America, an interview magazine. They were all under the same umbrella. And so I thought I wanted to go into magazines and .com and applied for a job at Condé Nast for their .com division, Condé Net, which at that time their idea was that everything from all their magazines, so like Vogue, The New Yorker, Vanity Fair, Condé Nast Traveler, right? All of those magazines, anything that was travel related went to a website called Concierge. Anything that was food related, so they owned Bon Appetit, that also went onto a website called Epicurious. And then they had style.com. So anything that was fashion related would go there. Great idea in principle, 20 years ahead of its time, because at that point, the idea of aggregating content just didn't exist. And there were no ways to monetize online content, right? You couldn't do paywalls. They just didn't work. And I was working for Condé Nast's, the concierge site. So all the travel stuff from all the magazines we were pulling on to our website and writing headlines. And it was awesome to some extent. And then a number of things just did not go my way. That was the spring of 2001. So 6 months into my life in New York was ruptured by September 11th, which was hard for a million reasons. And you and I talked about that. It was the first time I ever talked about that to anyone. It was on the last podcast, so I won't go back into all of that. But it was a defining moment in so many people's worlds, but in my career for sure, because the .com bubble also broke. Travel was super shaky. And I watched 3 bosses, all women, get fired. And as a result, I got promoted and other people got promoted, but it was so cutthroat and so brutal and just felt like corporate America could eat you up and spit you out despite how talented you were. All these women were amazing and did not deserve to go, but there needed to be a kind of scapegoat. So sat there, age 21, I was like, this is not what I thought I was getting myself into. I thought this is going to be like this creative, amazing environment where I could write and do things. And actually, I'm like cutting and pasting headlines. Yeah, I quickly figured out an escape route. Not quickly, it took
What
2
was
years.
that?
So that was grad school, which amused so many people because I was not an academic naturally in high school. But by the time university built me into an academic, I was such a nerd throughout college and really missed that rigor, like the rigor of studying. And so honestly, I couldn't figure out how to get out of Conde. And so I was like, I know. I'm going to go do a graduate degree in art history and I'll write about travel from an art perspective. And I'll be the freelancer who's like out on the ground, not the person who's cutting and pasting in the corporate environment. So applied to grad school because I needed a way out, which when I think about it, I'm like, what a flawed plan.
No, I think going to study when you're young and you don't know what to do, just going back to school is like the perfect procrastination.
I mean, absolutely. And God, I would so say that to anyone today, given where the world is. Like, stay in school for as long as you have to right now, or as long as you can, because who wants to be out in the real world, as it were?
Hmm. So you went to study art history, and your kind of vision was that you're going to be writing about travel through the perspective of art. Did that happen?
So I ended up in Seattle at the University of Washington, which was awesome. Just a great city to be in as a student and a great art scene, small enough that you could do crazy stuff before anyone noticed or questioned it. And so very quickly at university, we were launching crazy exhibitions and really ambitious things. Alongside my degree, I started working for collectors who had the biggest video collection. And again, this is 20 years ago when video was really a pioneering medium, and they had this giant collection of video work, the biggest one on the West Coast. And we're loaning all of this work worldwide. And so they built a space where they could show it in Seattle. And I was working really closely with their director and understanding how loans worked and how building an exhibition worked. And then they put me up for a job running Seattle University's new art space. So I was the first curator of that space. I was writing for Seattle Magazine, the Seattle Times, and The Stranger, which is an indie newspaper. So I was doing like reviews of shows. I wouldn't call it art criticism, but reviews of shows, and doing a bit of travel writing, but not quite as much as I had planned because I had all these other things going on. And then I met James Harris, who had and has one of the most amazing small gallery programs, I think, anywhere in the world. Unbelievable eye. And he was working on his own ostensibly. He had a part-time assistant, and I met him, and I think I bullied him into hiring me. And we had this unbelievably amazing relationship where I could say, "Hey, Jim, let's do this." And he'd be like, "Yeah, let's do that." And then something would go wrong and he'd be like, "You're fired." And I'd be like, "No, I'm not." He'd be like, "No, you're not, but don't do it again." But he let us take a bunch of seriously exciting risks and taught me so much in the 3 years that I worked with him. So much, from spackling a wall to building a crate to selling a Matisse drawing, right? Like everything, launching a show. He was the first real art world mentor, and still one of the best working relationships of my life.
So how did you end up back in the UK?
That was kind of a stepping stone. Jim and I launched Rashid Johnson's first exhibition outside of Chicago. And at that point, Rashid was beginning to get known outside of Chicago. No, he wasn't. He was kind of an interesting artist, but not with a huge presence. And we launched the show, and a bunch of galleries in New York paid attention. one being Nicole Clagsburn. And when she decided to represent him, Rashid said to her, hey, have you come across Carrie Scott? You should have her as a director. And Rashid was really clear that Seattle was not the center of the art world, which it wasn't. And I so often tell this story and I just say the same thing. So I'm trying to be more honest with you just because we had such a good conversation last time that I feel like I can be more open. But I think at the time I was a bit frustrated with Seattle and wasn't sure if I could be as ambitious as I wanted to be. And the reason I thought long and hard about admitting that before I said it, because I then got to New York and the ambition that was required of me just wasn't, it didn't suit me. So again, a bit like the Condé Nast thing, the New York gallery scene at that point was so cutthroat and my timing was terrible. So I went back in the spring of 2008. And we all know what happened later that fall. But as a result, it was just a super harsh place to be. And being a director of a major gallery, your job was to sell and only to sell. It wasn't to write press releases and think about exhibition hangs or be super involved with the artists. It was no. Your job is to build relationship with clients and make sure that they're buying work. And that wasn't my forte. So I found it really tricky. And this is where I start to answer your question. Nicole then, because I was the last one in, I was the first one out, she laid me off in what then became a round of layoffs, and she slowly changed the business and closed the gallery. But it killed me, right? My entire identity was tied up in what I did, and I'd never really failed at anything, and this felt like a massive failure despite it being just a financial decision on her part. And so stuck for things to do. I think for about 2 months, I tried to get another job, but no one was really hiring. And on the side, I was doing a few deals here and there, but nothing of significance. And then I kind of realized that actually maybe I should just do something on my own, and encouraged by some amazing people around me, like the artists that Nicole represented were amazing and are still huge parts of my life. Matt Day Jackson, Rashid Johnson, Mika Rottenberg were all sort of the same age, and they were like, just do it on your own, you'll be fine. I was like, yeah, I'm only $150,000 in debt from grad school, but sure, I'll be fine. And so I launched my own thing while also trying to find a real job. I was like, I have business cards, but I'm still applying for jobs literally every morning. I was sending out my resume to places. I got an offer to run a gallery in Nantucket and was like, no, that's really not what I'm doing. And yeah, slowly the business kind of grew. And I got introduced to Jimmy Moffitt maybe 6 months into that. And he was the head of art and commerce, a business that had been going for, 30, 40 years, representing fashion photographers like Annie Leibovitz, Stephen Meisel, Nick Knight, and some others. And he said to me, hey, I've just taken on Nick Knight, and you seem to be doing some sort of advising with artists. Because at the time I was helping artists write press releases and help them organize things so that galleries had better access to their databases. So he said, hey, can you go and take a look at what Nick's trying to do? Nick at the time had just launched a shop and a gallery alongside his studio. I was dating my now husband, who was also in the UK. And Jimmy also knew that I had a passport. So he's like, you could go and I wouldn't have to deal with this visa nonsense. And I was like, yeah, sure. I'll put together a 6-month retainer. And it was a silly amount of money, or at the time it was a silly amount of money. It was enough to pay the student loan and rent. And I was like, I am killing it. I think it also paid for my flight over and back. And I got here and things worked out with the guy. Things worked out really well with Nick, and I stayed.
You've kind of touched on it now a little bit, but tell us, what exactly is your job now?
Oh, God.
What do you do?
What do I do? So the business from there, for the last 15, 16 years, I have ostensibly tried to help artists do things outside of the traditional white cube. So with Nick, I was on retainer with Nick for 10 years, and my role with him changed over time, but was mostly about helping him work on his editions and prints and launch shows with him, get him shows worldwide. So we did shows in Tokyo, in Seoul, and help build a strategy with him that we worked backwards from. That was like, okay, you want an exhibition here? How do we do that? And then I realized that actually that kind of roadmap would work for other artists. So I started working with other artists to do that. And that blossomed into launching huge exhibitions in crazy spaces. So I launched a photography show of 240 works in a construction site at 180 Strand, which is now a proper gallery space, but it wasn't when we did our show there. I do books, I do documentaries, I started doing some broadcasting. I help build collections for corporates and for private individuals. I also will help someone just buy a work for their wall at home. So like domestic scale collections. So we kind of do everything. And I think I've just touched on it all. But about 24 months ago, I started to get frustrated that I had really enjoyed doing some of the artist interviews that I'd done first with Nick Knight for his series In Your Face, and then for the Sky Art show called The Art Show, which was on Sky Arts. But every time I pitched that kind of a thing, TV execs were like, kind of interesting, but let's make it more of a magazine show. And I didn't want to do that. Like despite where I started in life, I was like, ugh, the idea of wrapping it into like a travel story plus some hard hitting interviews, just it's too mushy, right? Like, let's just talk to artists. Artists are the reason why this whole art world is fascinating. And yet when art TV happens, it feels a bit like paint drying. So I was having that notion in my head. And then at the same time, I was watching my kids consume media and consume TV. And they're, my children have grown up in London. They spent 4 weeks in the summer in the mountains in Vermont, where my parents are based. But they are city kids who have a real love for mountain biking. And I tell you that only because they became mountain bike experts aged like 6 and 10.
Wow.
And I was like, how has this happened? Like they're telling me about some limited edition brake that they need, or that the suspension on their bike is actually not set to the right setting. And I was like, what? This is unbelievable knowledge. And then I realized that they were following the same 6 mountain bikers on YouTube, which they don't have unlimited access to, right? Like they were only allowed at that point to watch it on the weekends, but they would wait for these experts. And I was like, why does the art world have that? There's no 6-year-old watching anybody talk about art, right? They may be watching people talk about making art, and we did when the kids were younger, but there's no one saying, hey, let me explain to you why the Mona Lisa is interesting. So then I was like, could we build that? Is that something we should build? And could we build that? And that's where the idea for Scene, the platform that we launched in September of last year. No, not last year, 2024, came about. And it's kind of evolved into all sorts of things. But at its core, my mission is to connect the art world to the real world.
So what does Scene do now apart from connecting the art world to the real world?
So we do
what does it look like?
It's basically a media platform. So we interview artists. We do a bit of education around like, why is Mona Lisa important, or why do most celebrities buy a Basquiat, or what's the difference between the secondary market and the primary market? So really trying to kind of talk about the rules insofar as there are rules in the art world. Yeah, just demystify what it is that happens in the art world, so that everyone from a young professional to a young girl in nowhere, Wisconsin, can start to understand why art is important and why it's interesting, and maybe also become miniature experts.
But you still do the consulting as well, working with artists, helping people.
I do and I don't. So part of Scene's platform definitely has opened that up. We released a workbook last year, which I hope helps artists take the first step towards professionalizing their studios. And I do consults for artists as well. So we offer one-to-one sessions with artists. And for sure, I am still trying to help artists better monetize their work and their studios, but doing it in a different way than I did. So not that in-depth retainer situation where I'm like in the studio day to day helping an artist, but more working on a project by project basis with artists and still doing consulting for private collectors. And a huge part of what we've started to do, which I never had in the plan, but it just has happened, is a sort of corporate membership. So I've been thinking a lot about this idea of creative health. And I think we have three pillars of wellness. We talk a lot about our physical health. We talk a ton about our mental health, but no one really talks about our creative health. And I think that's a mistake. And I think, again, if you look at the way children behave in the world, they intuitively know those three pillars, right? You see a child who has a big emotion, they let that out. They express that emotion, sometimes to parents' detriment, but they're still good at communicating their feelings. Understand the need for physical movement and physical well-being, right? Kids don't sit still because they're like, our bodies are meant to move. We're going to run there. We're going to jump there. We're going to leap there. And so your sort of physical health, I think, is there from the word go. And the same is true of creativity, right? Kids make things. They sit down, they draw, they build stuff, whether it's out in nature or when you give them a pen. And yet, as grown-ups, we forget all these things, right? Which is why the wellness community is as big and as profitable as it is. We have to be told to exercise. We need to be reminded to take time out for our mental health. But I don't know that anyone's really talking about creativity that way. And I think going and not just making art, but looking at art and thinking about why an artist has done something is crucial to our wellness. And so I started to put together that as a notion and then took it to some corporate clients who weren't clients in the beginning, but talking about how their employees would benefit for understanding the art world, and their employees would benefit from having an artist come in and talking about their path to success or the journey that they've been on. And going to see exhibitions would be good for their employees. And surprise, surprise, these corporates were like, actually, this would be great. And really, most of corporate employee growth has been centered around axe throwing and team building or sports, right? Like you'll have clients who take boxes at the rugby or football games. And I put together an alternative. And that's been massively successful and massively rewarding because you have people who are like, I loved art as a kid or as a teenager or in college, but my life's been too busy and I don't get to it. And actually, galleries are intimidating. And so I've stopped going. Or the museum experience is not that rewarding. It's crowded and you have to do time tickets. And they're loving having access to art in a new way. So that's been awesome.
That sounds pretty genius, actually. I hope your next step is to tell them that the best thing for your mental health is actually buying art. Like there's nothing better you can buy than art. It's the best feeling because everyone's happy.
It's funny you should mention that. The win-win here has for sure been a happy accident, right? So some of the executive level employees falling in love with an artwork and then being able to buy it. And we've seen that happen a couple of times. And obviously, that really is the win-win because there not only am I educating, but we're feeding back into the art world and supporting the art world at source. So going to the artist gallery and saying, oh, hey, can we make a acquisition of this artist's work? And that's just, it's been an epic, an unexpected part of what we do. The other part I should admit here is that I have never loved the selling part. That's not to say the best part of my day is calling an artist and saying, hey, we sold this thing. Or one of the best parts of my day is watching a a client get it, sit there and be like, wait, I absolutely love this. I've got to have it. But I feel icky about being a salesperson. So that like hard sale or that really director level, like you've got to buy this thing and calling people and really staying on them, it's just not my natural habitat. And so when we were building Scene, I was like, could we make the first ever art consultancy that wasn't centered around transaction? That we're just saying, hey, I love Simonette Quamina's work. You should buy it. I don't care if you buy it or not, but you should. And because people are paying subscriptions, we don't have any skin in the game. We're not trying to get a commission. And when you look at the art world, everywhere almost, whether you're a gallery and you're selling your own book, you're an auction house, you're getting commission off the seller and the buyer, you're an art consultant and you're for sure incentivized by selling the work where you have the highest commission. Like everyone is kind of motivated by that commission. So I was like, can we build something where we don't do that? We just, as I said, we love Harold Feinstein's work. We think you should buy it. And if you like it, you should buy it too. We'll help you. We can help you. And in that case, if we are brokering an exchange, we will take a commission, but we're super transparent about what that looks like and what percentage that is. But ultimately, I am not the gatekeeper. You can go straight to the Harold Feinstein archive and buy his work directly, or you can go straight to Simonette Quamina's gallery and Praxi and buy from them. I'm not trying to just have the commission be our motivator.
If you're an art person with an online presence, listen up. I have something for you that's kind of a must-have, and that is a domain name that ends with .art. It's what I use for my own portfolio, and it just makes sense. It feels more professional, and it's more relevant than your usual bog standard .com address. I have a special link that will give you a 15% discount on your own .art domain, and you can even get a matching business email address, which is pretty useful. If you're ready to level up your online presence and get your discount, use my link or the discount code in the show notes. Can we briefly touch on, because I'm sure a lot of listeners don't know that side of it, the numbers, like what is the typical percentage or whatever that an art consultant gets when they facilitate a sale, or if an artist wants to employ you or a consultant to help them with their career, I would think the first thing they think is, oh, am I successful enough to afford this? What kind of numbers are we looking at here?
Great question. So in the case of a client buying a work through a consultant, so if a client comes to me and says, hey, I want to buy a couple pieces this year, can you help? There's sort of two structures that you can work on a consultant with. One is they just pay a flat fee based on the amount of work they're going to buy. So say they want to buy 5 pieces and they have a budget of $50K. We can just work out a flat, like, hey, it's going to cost $4,000. So 10% of the total of what you're going to buy. And then any discount that I secure from the gallery, I will pass on to the client directly. So much like an interior designer works. So that's one way. The other way is that it's completely just based off commission. So that same client says, hey, I want to buy 40 grand's worth of art this year. I don't know if it's one piece. I don't know if it's 2 pieces. I don't know. And then the commission is based off me going to a gallery and saying, hey, I've got this client who's interested in this photograph, say. Photograph costs $20K. I'd like a 20% discount, please. And the gallery will say, 15. And I'll say, 20? And then you negotiate, and sometimes they get you down to 10. And then in that case, I'll say to the client, hey, I got a 10% discount. Do you want to split that? And every client always says yes, as they should. And then I'm left with 5%, and the client has gotten a 5% discount. And they've gotten, obviously, the recommendation and the artwork. And we handle all the logistics of getting it there and that good stuff. So that's the client side. The artist side is different, and it totally depends on what the project is. If an artist gets in touch and says, hey, I need help writing a catalog essay, I price for that very differently than I would price for them just saying, could we have an hour-long consult? So my hour-long consults are actually priced a lot less than my day rate because I want them to be open and accessible to more artists than not. So it's £200 for an hour. But then there are bigger things. So like working on an exhibition together. If someone asks me to curate something, that's a different price than just a one-off ad hoc thing. Same with if we're doing something that's more in depth, obviously like working towards, I don't know, like a bigger strategy, there's a different price point for that. What I don't know, and this is a great question as a result, is if there is a kind of standard, that commission breakdown is standard across the industry. Some galleries, without fail, they will only give you 10%. Other galleries will push to 20 from their 50% of the sale. But I don't know that there is a sort of standard. There are a few people doing mentoring programs now. So maybe a standard will come out of that. But those programs, I think, are slightly different than what we do. So I don't know. It's all very transparent, though, and we put all our prices up on the website. So artists can say, oh, God, I could definitely afford one session with her. Could I do a kind of day long where she comes to the studio and unpacks things? Maybe not yet. So for me, it's all about transparency. Just be honest about your rates, like a normal business would. But the art world is weird and hides prices.
Yeah, and then there's like these online course or whatever, I don't know if it's a course or something, people who are like, join our group and then you will learn all about how to get your work into a museum. They do these webinars where they're trying to sell the hundreds of dollars of membership, and you ask them a question in the Q&A and they're like, join the group and you will find out. I'm like, you don't know, do you?
Yeah, you have no idea. We've talked about and we've thought about whether it would make sense for me to do a masterclass, just from the perspective of time and reach. And my instinct is like, no, because of exactly what you've just said. That being said, we wrote this workbook. I don't know why I'm saying we. I wrote this workbook. It took me like 8 months to write. It's behind me. I would show it to you, but I can't. And it has all sorts of things in it that are really practical, because I wanted, not everyone can afford a £200 session. So this is $39.99. And if you read it and you do the stuff in it, it will help. And it is so much of the stuff that I do in those sessions. But also we have all this stuff online. Like we have templates for making an outreach PDF so that you can send it to galleries if you want to get representation, or that you can send to clients. And we have a inventory database, both in Excel and in Airtable. So that, so many artists are like, wait, what do you mean? What's an inventory database? And I'm like, you need to know all the work you've ever made should be in a database. Like an image of the artwork, the size of the artwork, the medium of the artwork, the price that you sold it for, if you sold it, the price that you'd like to sell it for, if you haven't sold it. So that one day when a gallery does come along or a museum comes along and says, hey, we want to do a mid-career survey of your work, can you show me everything you've got? You're not like, oh God, I have to build that now from scratch. And for young artists, they're like, but I'm not there yet. And I'm like, yeah, but if you start doing this now, a bit like flossing your teeth, you're never going to get a cavity. Like, just do it. So we have all those resources just there and available, because again, it was like, how do I make this easier? Sure, you have to pay your £7 a month or however much it is. I think it's $7 and it's $10. It's $10 and £7 a month to get access to that. But once you pay it one time, you've got access to those documents and you can download them and use them as you need to. So sorry, that was just my response to this masterclass idea, that I'm like, actually, it's far better if I just give you the resources and you do it than then we sit here and like do a masterclass. So talk to me in a year and maybe I will have been convinced to do one.
I liked the part where you're talking how like you don't love the selling part and you just want to show people how cool art is. I think this is where installation art comes in, because it's such a weird niche in the contemporary art world. Maybe tell me your perspective. What's the role of installation art within the art world, in your opinion?
So, because you can't avoid installation art, as in, it's really easy to walk past something on a wall. But an immersive installation, and I'm not talking about some immersive video thing, and we can get into specifics on what I really mean there. And I am taking a stab at something. But like,
I think I know what you're talking about.
we don't need Van Gogh, moving Van Gogh images. We really don't, ever. But I'm talking about like objects that get in your way and make you engage with them. They help us think about the stuff on the wall more deeply. And I mean that. I think her name was Christine Waller, and I want to look it up. There was this artist in Seattle who she installed like these, it was maybe 100 strings, like super fine strings that looked like a C in a single room, in single space, called the Siama space. And it was just a phenomenal exhibition space that took huge risks. But you basically walked in the door and you were confronted by these strings. And in some light, you couldn't see the strings. And in other light, you could. And it like rippled across. And this is an installation I saw 22 years ago, call it. I don't know, something like that. And I can still vividly remember how it made me feel. And I would say that like installation art does that more often than not, because you physically have to confront it and negotiate with it. And when we did that installation that I referred to really quickly about all the photographs, the 450 photographs, 325 of those we installed hanging, like suspended in the space so you could see the front and back of them. And it was a single project by John Pawson. It's called Spectrum. And he was looking at color, so from light to dark, so from white to black, the colors of the rainbow. And so you had to negotiate these 324 images. You had to move through space, feeling the color move, and then you could move back through space and feel it backwards. And it was such a magical experience, if I do say so myself. Again, because you had to confront your body and the work and how those two things existed on the same plane. And then it changes your relationship with how you then look at those same images or any images on the wall, which is more like a page. So I think it is unbelievably important. And the tough thing about it is, right, how do you preserve it? How do you show it? Because it takes more space and resource to accomplish these things. And indeed, how do you collect it? How do you become a custodian of it?
Yeah, I've been wondering about these questions. Like, often, even successful artists that I've had on the show say they basically have to subsidize their installation work with smaller, more easily sellable works. And so, where's the value in installation art? Should artists maybe, you can't generalize, obviously, but maybe it's in the ephemeral experience and like we can charge ticket prices for entry, or I don't know, like, yeah, it's not a commercial medium. So, how can installation artists pay for making these amazing experiences?
If we crack that, we have cracked it all. I don't know. It probably is ticketing an event, right? And not feeling that is wrong, because it's not. And you see this more and more. So that actually the space that I did the Spectrum show in has now become a amazing space for art in London. It's called 180 Studios. And they only do installation-based immersive projects. And all of them are ticketed. So that is exactly how they're making it make sense. And they have artists in there like Arthur Yaffa, so video work, but they also do, hard to navigate installation works. And it's amazing. And I think that they are making a proper business of it, but it's a pioneering way to think about how do you monetize an installation-based practice.
Yeah, there was an interesting topic that came up once where an artist showed in an institution that charges entry prices, and their exhibition was extremely popular, like tens or maybe over 100,000 visitors. And they didn't see anything of that revenue because they just had that one artist fee that was set out from the beginning. And that kind of opened this door to thinking how maybe if an artist is showing at a museum, say, that charges money for entry, maybe we need to think about having contracts with the venue where after a certain point, you get a percentage of every ticket sold.
Yeah.
Because it's your work that's bringing in the people.
In the same way, right, that book deals have royalties, or music records do too, if Spotify and Apple could behave better. Yeah, I don't see why. I mean, I think that is an obvious commercial structure that should be in place, and it's crazy that it hasn't been. And maybe it is for much bigger artists. One of the shows that I did with Nick Knight was a survey show of 90 works at Dalam Museum in Seoul. Amazing museum, amazing city, just extraordinary group to work with. Like, they were so great. And one of the things they did was that Nick and the merch were aligned. And what I mean by that is he was going to get a percentage of sales. Now, I think it was, I can't remember how big it was, but it was, it was a significant amount, which meant that he got really involved in designing the merch and thinking about the merch, and made these like epic notebooks and phone cases and licensed images that he normally wouldn't to a museum to make this cool. He did a skinheads sweatshirt. So like one of his most iconic series, like a book that has sold out 17 times. I think it is on its like, I don't know, however many editions now, but images that you can't buy. And then he did a sweatshirt of it. And it's awesome. And it's a limited edition. So like making sure that the artist is aligned with ticket sales or merch is only good for the museum, because it means that the artist, one, will promote it, two, will make better stuff for it, I think, and can dedicate more resource, like more studio resource, to making it better. So yeah, advice to museums. They should definitely be doing a percentage of ticket sales.
That's actually very interesting, because I don't know who's responsible for the merch, who designs it. Like, there's the books of the artist when there's a big show on, but there's always merch. And is the artist involved in that? Do they get a cut from it? I want to know, at least for the Sydney museums.
Yeah, I mean, here for sure. Like the Design Museum, God, their merch, of course it is, because it's the Design Museum, but their merch is so good. Like, they've just done a show with Harlan Miller, and he's done pencil cases that are awesome. I bought 5 of them to give as gifts over Christmas to friends and clients. He's also done like a jacket and a set of skateboards. Like, it's super cool. So I'm sure he's aligned with the sales of that.
I wonder if the art museums are the same. I know that there's I've been in some shows in regional galleries who have also a little gallery shop, and I could take my merch there for sale, which is cool. Totally different model though, because they're not charging tickets for the entry, and they're not like MoMA, whatever, gift shop where they have the coolest. I mean, they still have really cool stuff. I love a gallery gift shop. It's my favorite place, but
me too. Here, I know that like the V&A, when they take stuff from studio, like if merch is existing, then that's on consignment, and so you definitely get paid. But yeah, I don't know how the Tate works, or you'd like to think that they were all giving back to the artists. But you made me think of Rishi Johnson's show at the Guggenheim. That show is the best attended show in the Guggenheim's history, which is awesome.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
But like, does he get a percentage of ticket sales? I don't know. I don't think so. Probably not. And the museum would argue, no, that pays for the price of the production of making this thing happen, along with patrons. And no, he shouldn't get a percentage, but equally, right? if it's the most well-attended show ever.
Well, that's what I mean. It's like the book publishing, right? You cover the costs of actually making the book, and then everything after that, the author gets a percentage of all the sales. This should be the same with ticket prices. Like the gallery has spent an X amount on putting up the show, the artist fees, all the logistics, the staff, and they know that amount. So
Well,
everything past that.
We're going to get in trouble. But I agree.
Well, I'm just thinking, artists who are listening, if you have like a museum show coming up, think about it. Talk to a lawyer. See if you can finagle something in your contract that's like, on the off chance that this is a super seller show, let's think about it, because I mean, in publishing, 90% of books never make a profit. So it would be the same in museum exhibitions. You never see anything past the artist fee, but in case it blows up and goes viral, pay me.
Pay me. I like it. I just like the pay me. Pay the artists first.
Yeah.
It's really should be my favorite quote.
So if an installation artist wanted help, like, hey, Carrie, I want to show at the Venice Biennale, could they come to you for help, or have you moved past that now?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Definitely not moved past the Venice Biennial. No, of course. I would love to. I mean, curating is still, well, I'm not even going to say curating. Launching exhibitions is still my like ultimate happy place. And we haven't talked about that, but like the joy I feel installing a show, physically installing a show. And I'm a total weirdo, and you can ask anyone that I've ever worked with. I like picking up heavy crates and moving heavy artwork and like getting sweaty and hammering. And I think it goes back to when I was running the nonprofit and working with Jim, like we were doing all that. And so I like getting my hands dirty, and I'm a really practical person, believe it or not. So yeah, like any opportunity to do that, I'm happy. And I love it when artists bring me projects and I can say, yes, I can help with that, or I don't know how to help with that. I've never done that before. I worked with an artist on and I'm not going to say the name of a grant, but a huge grant. Everyone would know it if I said it. And I worked with them on an application recently. And I loved that this was a grant I know of, but I'd never looked at the application process. I'd never seen how rigorous the requirements are. And I loved being able to like get into the weeds with that artist. We still haven't heard whether he's got it or not, but I really liked that process. So any artist that has anything, like always ask. I don't understand these galleries that are like, we don't accept submissions. I'm the complete opposite. I'm like, show me, what are you working on? I'm constantly curious and interested, and might take me 2 months to write you back, honestly, because I'm fighting fires and we're a tiny team. But I want you to get in touch with me, whether it's like a DM on Instagram or, my phone number is readily available to anyone who needs it. Same with my email. So like, yeah, that was a very long-winded way of saying, yeah, if you want me to curate something at the Venice Biennial, I'll do that.
Sounds cool. So, like, can people also come to you and be like, hey, Carrie, my dream is to show at, say, the Mona in Tasmania. Can you help me with that? Can you help me get a show in this fabulous museum outside of my country that I don't know how to do it?
Can I try to help you? Yes. As in, it would be a dream of mine to even just go to Mona. I've wanted to go there my whole life. That sounds good. Is there a blueprint and can I ensure success? No way. But if you're an artist who says, hey, I'd like a major museum mid-career show in the next 2 years, can you help me build a strategy to get there? Yes, absolutely I can. And am I pretty confident that we could get there? Yeah, I am, if the work is good. And like critically, that's why I do the consult. because one of the gorgeous things about it is like people have booked and I've been in that call being like, oh my God, your work is amazing. And I would now like to work with you on getting this. And that's happened, I don't know, 4 or 5 times where it's been me being like, hey, Ellen Young, amazing installation-based artist, based in LA. And like she did a consult and I immediately was like, oh my God, you're amazing. She makes these sculptures that are out of ink. And I can't even tell you how amazing they are. Amazing, amazing. Everyone should go look at her work. But it was me on the end of that call. It was like, Ellen, could we work together properly on some things? And can I help just send your work to contacts I know? Because I just think it's remarkable and it needs to be seen.
Sounds great. You mentioned the galleries and that on your website you have forms or like templates, how to submit work. Tell me honestly, in now 2026, can you even do that as an artist anymore? Like all I hear is galleries saying, "Don't contact us."
This is a tough one. I don't know how galleries possibly can discover artists if they're saying no. And maybe they don't want to, right? And if a gallery says that, maybe you should listen, maybe. But I feel like it's a really flawed way to run your business. So I have always ignored it. Now, that's not to say that like Hauser and Wirth, right? I don't even think they say that anywhere, but are you going to get their attention as an artist? No, probably not. Are there other ways that you could get their attention? Yeah, probably. Launch an amazing show somewhere. Send a director a note saying, I'd like you to come and see this show. You're allowed to do that. Where the template comes in handy is that like emerging to mid-career artist who is looking for an emerging to mid-career gallery who should be accepting submissions. And if they're not, then they're probably not the right program for you. But where you can send a note that says, hi, I love your program. I love this specific artist in your program. And I think you've done X, Y, and Z. Like show a working knowledge of what that gallery does and why you think you're a good fit for it. Not saying like, I think I'm a good fit because I do this. More, I think I'm a good fit because I've seen what you do and it really struck me. And then you're like, look at my PDF or don't, but here it is. Easy for you to understand. You don't have to go look at a website that you have to navigate. I'm going to help you navigate through my career by scrolling really fast. And some artists are like, ugh, that doesn't sit well with me because you're dumbing down my practice and it's really complicated and people should discover it themselves. And I'd say, yeah, sure, in a perfect world, but we don't live in a perfect world and everyone is so busy. And like I said, it might take me 2 months to get back to an artist who does send me that PDF, but at least I've got the PDF and I don't have to put in a huge amount of effort. Now, I have said this before and I got talked about. I mean, this is years ago. This is like 3 years ago when my Instagram following was like 6,000 people. I said this publicly that I thought that artists should have a quick elevator pitch in a PDF that they can send to curators, to gallerists, to anyone. And a very famous, two known white men, and that's important, decided to do a podcast that was a debate about whether I was right or wrong. They mentioned my name, and for half an hour, they referred to me as she or her or this girl. I think I was a girl, which I was flattered by at that point because I was like still 43. And I was like, are you serious? And one of them was like, no, no, no. I do not want an elevator pitch. I do not want a PDF. I want to spend days and months and years like figuring out the artist and then I'll get back to them. And this idea that an artist needs an elevator pitch is a joke. And I listened to them and was like, really? Like, I'm so glad that you have the time to do that. And, this is someone who holds a seat at a museum and has done for years. And his job is comfortable in some ways, I guess. I assume. Whereas meanwhile, the rest of us, like the gallerists, are so time poor, underpaid, running around like crazy, trying to do the best for art. So make it easy, is my opinion. And maybe again, for saying this out loud, I'll get in trouble, but meh.
I don't know if I should say this either, but I went to this talk where a gallerist was answering questions. And of course, the first question was, how do I get into the gallery? And they were like, no, do not contact me. We will find you. And then in the next breath, they're talking about how the best artists are the ones who go to the studio every day and they work. And I'm like, how are you going to find that artist who's going to the studio every day and working on their artwork who doesn't do anything else? Like, please explain. That's just so old school, romanticized, unreality kind of way of looking at things.
Yeah. So, I mean, flawed logic. It's not going to work. People aren't going to find you. We know this. I wrote this workbook, and like the funny thing about the workbook is it's all advice that like I've given myself to have a modicum of success here. But I wrote the workbook. We put it out in the world. I've barely mentioned it. I think because I was waiting for feedback. And like we've sold a number of copies, but I'm finally like, actually, this is really dumb. All the feedback's been amazing for it. I should probably start promoting it because no one's going to just find it. Even though I've got 43,000 followers, like no one's going to find it. If they don't know it exists, how are they going to find it? I need to tell people. Same rules apply for artists, right? You could be making the best work. And if you're not actively trying to put it out there, and I know that sucks, and I know it's hard work, but if you're not going to get anywhere. So the template is to make that easier, right? That you can literally just drag and drop. It's in Canva. Like we literally tried to make it. We have a Canva version and a slides version so that it's as easy, like use the platform that you're most familiar with, drop images in. It will crop them to the right size. There's text boxes so you know how much text you should throw in there. There's like a reminder to put in your email address at the end so that the gallery can be like, click, I'm going to respond to that person. Yeah, we just tried to make it easy because we know it sucks. Promotion's pain in the ass. Trust me. Yesterday, I was asked to make 3 videos and I was like, really? But you got to.
What's the hard truth you've had to learn in the art world or in your own work?
Not everybody's going to like you. And it doesn't matter, I think is probably it. Yeah. I'm like, should I take that back and do another one? But I that's it. Not everyone's going to like you and it doesn't matter. So same would be true for artists, right? Not everyone's going to like your work and that's okay.
Yeah, it's my firm belief that every artist's work has an audience somewhere and you just have to find it. And a really interesting thing that's transpired through talking with artists is that sometimes the audience is like on a different continent that you've never been to. And then one time you happen to go for a residency or something and you discover that, oh my God, they really like my work here. And it's like, I don't know how you find it, but it's there.
Yeah. Yeah. Something for everyone, I guess. Right.
Do you have a highlight in your career or a project that you're especially proud of?
That shouldn't be so hard, should it? Man, it's a bit like choosing your favorite child changes.
Well, at the moment, what's your favorite?
I mean, scene as a whole would be the thing I'm most proud of for sure. I think, actually, let's be really honest. I, for years, resisted turning the camera on myself, and it was all about the artist. It was all about promoting the artist, and it still is. But I started to trust my voice more and more, and so I'm probably most proud of that transition. Yeah, that I've got to a place where fighting for female artists or saying the hard truth about the art world, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Why are we doing that? That like I'm actually having those conversations out loud and in public and that it's having an effect. Not necessarily that it's like making change, but that the conversations are now being had. So I'm most proud of that, I guess. But as I was saying that, I was thinking the thing that I am really most proud of in the course of my career, and I was thinking about it the other day, that I think since the very beginning, right, since university, that massive paper I did on Mina Loy, and I was talking about and trying to surface a woman who had been completely ignored in her lifetime, really. She was in that James Joyce circle, and then a book came out of her lost poems. But like I've always been interested in surfacing unsung heroes or voices that have been marginalized, which is a word we use a lot now, but actually that I've been doing forever in my career. When I look at the sum of the parts of what I've done, that's been the line I've held through and through, right? That like at gyms, we showed a young Black artist who was interested in his Black identity that we all now know as Rishi Johnson, or that he had as many women on his roster as he did men. And that, I've been, I don't want to say beating that drum because I haven't been beating it. I've just been doing it since 2005. So I'm proud of that.
What do you wish artists did that you see a lot of them don't do, or what do you wish they understood better about the art world?
I think this is advice for anybody, but it is true of artists. Artists think that like they've sent an email and then their job is done, that they've done the thing to put their work in front of the right person. And then they stop. And they're like, well, okay, so that it didn't work, or no one got back to me. And I wish that we could change that culturally so that people understood that like an email is a pretty passive way of getting in touch with someone. And if you really want to reach them, think of other ways that you can reach them. And I'm not talking about harassing someone and sending 16 emails. I'm talking about like actually truly connecting with someone, whether it's in real life or on the internet. That the relationship piece here is the reason we all kind of exist. And I would say this like you and me, right? We had one great conversation and now we've had two. And I think fondly of that first conversation and I will think fondly of this. But I would imagine that our relationship will now build from here. Like, I don't think that this is just a one-time, two-time chat. And so it's the relationship piece. I would want artists to think a bit about that. And if you think about artists back in the day, right? The Man Ray, James Joyce, Mina Loy, they were like a group. It was a posse. It was a sort of collective. And we've lost that a little bit. And instead artists are like, but I wrote the email. It's like, no. It's not about the email. It's about, like I touched on it a second ago, it's writing to a gallery or talking to a gallery or going to a gallery and explaining to them that what they're doing is important to you and building a relationship with them, not just a business transaction.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I think it's also the times have changed and it's more difficult, I guess, to kind of meet or reach people. But you're right about that. I'm just thinking back, like everyone who's the oldest people that I've interviewed were all part of some kind of a group when they were coming of age as an artist. You know, they had like friend crit groups, or they were in feminist activism groups, or you name it. Whereas now it's kind of like, yeah, it's rare. You don't hear much about that anymore, do you?
Not so much.
Something to think about. Do you have a dream project? Like if you could do just anything, anywhere, with whoever, what would you want to do?
I do have a dream project. I keep imagining this, and it's had multiple iterations and it changes, but this has been like a 6-year fetish. It's like like I'm fixated on it. I like the idea of building a cube. And at first, this cube was just like a big glass cube that you could put an artwork in. And then that artwork could go sit anywhere. And like a major artwork, like a Titian. And then you'd put the Titian in the city square that has never had a Titian. Or you'd put it on the side of a mountain that has never had a Titian. 'Cause why would you? It's crazy. It's totally insane. Right. But I really like that idea. And actually, John Pawson and not really, I told him the idea and then he went and he made it and it's so cool. It's like a pavilion. It's amazing. Right. And we never were able to realize it because we could never find the right patron for it. And then that morphed into, okay, well, hang on. Could you do like a holograph cube? And I went to South by Southwest in Austin and Netflix was promoting a show called Body Problems. They did this insane holograph that it was just this big cube and this body appeared on it. And there was smoke and there was a countdown and all these people were standing around this cube waiting for this thing to start. They didn't even know it was going to start. And then it started and it would just literally, it was the most crowded block in Austin for the entire South by Southwest. And I was like, wait, can we do that with artists? Like, could you have Lubaina Hamid like talking about her work and could you make it like really epic and just so engaging and make people gather around it? A bit like Circa has done in Piccadilly with their big screens. But then that cube could go to places that don't have access to art. So like inner cities, who they never get to go to museums, or could you take it to nowhere, Wisconsin, drop it in a parking lot? And like, well, how would that change how people look at art? And could you bring the art world into this visual setting that we find ourselves in, those like Times Square, Piccadilly things? And so that would be my dream, impossible project.
That's actually really cool. It doesn't sound impossible at all, but I really like the idea of bringing art that's made for a gallery setting into the public realm and still keeping it safe. That's very interesting.
But I think, I mean, hey, God, I didn't mean to. It's funny, right? That is so installation based without being installation based. One of my favorite works ever, and I did my master's on sound art, and we should have talked about that, but we are totally running out of time. One of my favorite works is Max Neuhaus, who he has a sound piece in a pedestrian island in Times Square. And so when you walk over the pedestrian island, it harmonizes with the loudest sounds in the city. It was put there like 50 years ago, and Creative Time, I think it's Creative Time, keep it running. And it's amazing because it's imperceptible. Like there's a tiny little plaque on the floor, but other than that, you don't know it's there. Except that when you walk over it, the sound changes in the city and you're like, wait, what is that? How did that happen? And so you've just bumped into this art experience that you barely know you've had, but it has huge impact. And I've always loved the idea of that, or even like when artists do billboards. And so you're anticipating an advertisement, but you're looking at a Christian Opie or something. So it's an extension of that, I suppose.
Yeah. No, I love when art is just lurking in unexpected places and you come across something and you're like, wait, oh, that's art, like, what is it doing here?
Yeah, it's the best.
Yeah. What's coming up for you in the near future? What are you working on?
Oh boy. I have an exhibition that opens at 10 Corso Como in Milan in March. And it's another iteration of this new American West photography show that I co-curated with Howard Greenberg. And this one is far more historic. So there's something like 80 works in it, all anchored by Miriam Eisler and Alexi Ribu's journey across the American West together, where they took pictures side by side, but they never shared them with each other. And it resulted in this beautiful tome of a book. And we're looking at the American West again, because I think that we all have this notion of what the American West looks like. And it's Ansel Adams and it's big, sexy, colorful street signs that are decaying. But actually the story is so much more complex than that. So that's the next thing.
Okay. And where can people find out more about you, find out about Scene, find those templates you talked about?
So the website's a great resource and it's Scene, SEEN, like have you seen .art. So just scene.art. And yeah, the best thing to do if you want more of me is to follow me on Instagram. I'm quite active there with my thoughts on things. And it's just Carrie Scott Curates.
I'll put the links to that in the show notes so people can go and follow you and check out everything you do. Well, thank you, Carrie, for taking the time. It's been lovely hearing about your work.
Well, thank you so much for having me back. I think you are such a good interviewer. I really do.
Oh, thank you.
It's
That's a very wonderful compliment.
It is a joy to talk to you, really, truly. So thank you.
That was Carrie Scott, based in London. You can find out more about her work and find the resources she talked about on her website, scene.art. And you should follow her on Instagram at Carrie Scott Curates. Links to those, as well as everyone mentioned in this episode, are in the show notes and on our website, installationartpodcast.com. If you found this conversation valuable, please share it with a friend or with all your friends by sharing it on social media. Word of mouth is how this podcast grows, and every share helps. Thank you for listening and for sharing. Until next time.